If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Well, hello there. It's great to have you here for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. Today we are chatting about baby brain. So this is a term I have thrown around a lot since becoming pregnant and a mother all those years ago. And to be honest, I haven't really given the term baby brain much thought. So I was super excited to get in touch with Julia Jones, discuss all things baby brain and how birth changes you from the inside out. So Julia Jones is a postnatal doula, trainer and founder of Newborn Mothers. She is a best-selling author of Newborn Mothers. So when a baby is born, so is a mother. And she has also published a recipe book called Nourishing Newborn Mothers. She lives in Western Australia with her husband and 3 children. And in this episode today, we discuss what a baby brain is, when does it start, we discuss how long baby brain lasts, and why is baby brain even a thing. So the first 10-15 minutes, we do dive into the brain changes that occur, so a little bit technical. But then the final half of the episode, we discuss how a person might be feeling with baby brain, and we go through some strategies and tips to help embrace it, recognize it, and also to help reduce the overwhelm that might also be associated with baby brain. So it's a great episode, one I trust you will really get a lot of value out of. So before we do dive into this episode, I invite you to come and join us inside Fitness Mama. If you have found you're not exercising as much as you'd like to during pregnancy and post-pregnancy, perhaps you're busy or you've lost the motivation to exercise, or you're not sure how to best be looking after your body, or you've got pelvic girdle pain, abdominal muscle separation, you're not sure about the best exercises for you, or you've had your baby, you want to get back into exercise, you want to get back into running after birth, and you want the best Kickstarter possible, then Fitness Mama is for you. So join us for these convenient, short, easy workouts that you can do from the comfort of your home whilst your baby sleeps or your toddler runs around causing havoc, or at the end of a long day at work. Head to fitnessmama.com and the link is in the show notes. Right, let's dive into this episode. So Julia, thank you so much for joining me today on the Fitness Mama podcast. I am having a little chuckle as I'm introducing you because we are talking all things baby brain. And although I do not have a baby brain, I forgot to hit record. So here we are again. For those who don't know who you are, can you please give us a little rundown of what you do, why you do what you do, and all those important, amazing things?
Sure. So my name's Julia. My business is called Newborn Mothers, and I've been working in postpartum care for about 15 years now. And most of what I do now is training. So we train mostly doulas, but also midwives, physios, social workers. And what we find is that a lot of people have gone through some other kind of training, even like a full degree, and they're really noticing that there's a gap in their knowledge when it comes to postpartum. There's sort of things missing there where we really focus on pregnancy and childbirth and not, then they're kind of like, there's this bit where, what happens next? And I don't feel like I've really got the full skills. Or also they might have knowledge in things like breastfeeding and baby care, but in terms of that whole life transition of becoming a mother, the initiation, the rite of passage, and the changes that happen in your brain and your personality, and the way that a community and a professional should support a mum through that change. That's really missing, I think, in a lot of people's kind of understanding. not just in formal education, but in our entire culture. It's just a real blind spot. So that's what I do now.
And I just love that we're chatting because I 100% agree. It's like pregnancy, we're taken care of during pregnancy, and then after we have our baby, there's all the sort of specialised, I guess, services, as you said, breastfeeding, caring for the baby, mental health. But in terms of the holistic support, we're really lacking. So this term of matrescence, would you say it's quite a new term?
Well, it was actually coined by Dana Raphael, who's an anthropologist, and she also coined the word doula in its modern sense. So she was around in the 70s, and she was a really, really formative person in this space of bringing some of these traditions back to life. She herself had a difficult time breastfeeding, and she thought, why is breastfeeding so hard for me when surely, like, every other mother for all of human history has been able to breastfeed their child, because we didn't used to have formula. Like, humans couldn't have survived if it was really this hard to breastfeed. So what are we doing differently? And so she, as an anthropologist, obviously started to look at other cultures. And what she found is that in nearly 200 cultures that she studied, there is a special role, a specifically named person who comes after a baby's born and cares for the mum. And that's where she kind of like coined the word doula, which has come to mean different things over the years, but that was her intention for the word.
Oh, interesting. I know we're talking about baby brain, so I know we're going on a bit of a tangent, but this is really interesting. Doula, I feel I've always known it traditionally from someone who actually attends the birth. But are you saying it initially came out as more the postpartum care?
Yeah, well, originally, if you go far back enough, it's actually a Greek word that means a female slave, and that doesn't really have very good connotations. And Greek people actually don't like the word and have even asked us to stop using it. So I often talk about professional postpartum care or a postpartum worker or something like that. I try and use a lot of other words as well, but I still do throw in the word doula there because people know then what I'm talking about.
Isn't that fascinating? I can totally see that. If we're using the word doula and it means female slave, it's not great.
No. And it has a whole lot of connotations in Greek that, aren't pleasant. They're not really what we are meaning. So Dana Raphael's story is that she was talking about this work one day in the supermarket saying, I've been researching this role and all these different cultures that have this specific person who comes and cares for mums. And then her version of events is that there was an old Greek grandmother overheard her and turned around and said, oh, we call them doulas. So that's where she came across the word with all good intentions. But I'm sure if she was still alive today, she probably would be, like exploring the semantics of it a little bit more now that we know more. So she initially meant breastfeeding support. That was her original research. Then she also coined the word matrescence as well. But what happened with the word doula is then as birth became more medicalised and we weren't providing that emotional, physical, practical support to mums, the continuity of care that mums needed in the labour room, that's where that non-medical role kind of moved into that world to fill that gap. And then doulas now are much more known as birth support.
Yeah, right. So fascinating. Okay, let's move on to baby brain then, because this, again, is a term that perhaps is thrown around a lot, and I actually didn't even think of much about this term at all. It was just a term that we use, and it's a throwaway term. But you've got some more to say about this throwaway term that I've been using for the last decade of my life. So let's go into it. What is baby brain from your perspective?
Yeah. So obviously a lot of people think baby brain just means like stupid, ditzy, forgetful, clumsy, just all bad things. And for a long time, I really rejected the idea of baby brain because I just thought it was another way that we were keeping women in the kitchen, another way to make sure women stayed in their spot and didn't, do anything other than be a good housewife and a good mother. So I really didn't like it or associated it until I actually went to a talk with a paediatrician and lactation consultant called Christina Smiley. She was the first person who introduced me to this idea about 10 years ago, talking about baby brain as a positive thing and reclaiming it. And even in that 10 years that I've had a better understanding of baby brain, it is changing so fast. There are new studies coming out all the time and so much more that we know and understand about baby brain. So the easiest way to understand it is if there's a computer algorithm that can tell with 100% accuracy whether it's looking at the brain of a person who's been pregnant or a person who's never been pregnant. And so just being pregnant already completely changes your brain with no other impacts. Like even if that baby is stillborn, or even if, you give the baby to someone else to raise and you aren't engaged with parenting at all, just the act of being pregnant already changes your brain completely. And some of those changes are kind of sound a bit scary. Like one of them is grey matter reduction, which, that really doesn't sound like a good thing. But when you actually look at it as a more bigger picture thing, the way I like to describe it is it's a little bit like getting an upgrade to your operating system. So you do clear a lot of stuff out. It's like you empty out all of the files, the cabinets, throw all this stuff out. And then you have to rewire. Okay, what do I actually need in this new role to be a good parent? So there's two real main characteristics of these changes, and one of them relates to neuroplasticity, so the changeability of your brain, and the other one relates to oxytocin, which is the love hormone. And so you can understand why when you're entering to this new life where someone else is 100% dependent on you to survive, that you need to adapt to this role very quickly, which is what the plasticity is for. And you need to really bond with that baby, and not only with the baby, but with your partner and with your community as well, because we all know it should take a village to raise a child, and that's how we were designed. So that's kind of the two main areas of changes. And what we know now is that baby brain actually is a really protective thing for mothers. It can help them not only to be good mothers, but also to be happy mothers. And that it also comes with a whole lot of things that make mothers better in other aspects of their life too. So mothers' brains are more ambitious, they're better at assessing risk, they're more efficient, we have better sensory awareness, and all of these things can make us better in lots of different aspects of our lives as well, not just motherhood.
Yeah, wow. Because I've always thought of it as a term, like sort of as an excuse for forgetfulness or for fatigue when you're feeling really tired and you're not, at your normal peak functioning self. So that is all very interesting. Is it mostly?
And that's still true. I mean, it is tiring going through massive brain changes. It's a bit like going through puberty. It's a similar kind of thing that you do feel a bit overwhelmed. Things are a bit more chaotic. Your brain is really open, learning tons of new information. And it's hard to know during that stage, which of these things do I need to hold on to and which of these things do I not, so you can be more forgetful. However, I also want to just draw a little line under that too and say we also don't care for mums very well in our society. So whilst these changes are designed to be good, they can have negative impacts when a mother is too stressed, too overwhelmed, too lonely, so we should also be looking out for these things in a more negative way as well.
Okay, well, I do want to dive into that. But first, sorry, I don't know why I'm really interested in this, but do you know whether or not the baby brain, like as you said, the reduction in grey matter, is that as a result of hormonal changes that occur during pregnancy? Is that the main driver behind all of this?
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yes, it's likely. there's still so much we don't know. So it's really hard to tell, but definitely the biological act of being pregnant triggers a lot of the changes. But the changes continue after the baby's born only if you play a hands-on role in parenting, which is another kind of bit of evidence that we've adapted for a village of carers, because actually any carer, they don't have to be biologically related to the child, can learn better parenting skills and actually experience some brain changes by hands-on interacting with that baby.
Amazing. So adoptive parents, husbands, partners, everyone can get baby brain.
Exactly. So there's both environmental impacts and there's also like just biological impacts as well that can give you some of these changes. And that's really important to keep in mind, because that's another way that we can sometimes try and trap mums into only one role in life by kind of assuming that somehow they would be superior. But in fact, aunts, uncles, grandparents, older brothers and sisters, anyone can learn to be a great parent just by parenting.
That's great. I think that's also probably quite reassuring for parents who are in the thick of it and feeling quite isolated at the moment, or like they've got the sole role of parenting.
Yes, knowing that it wasn't actually designed that way. In traditional human societies, we would have had about 8 to 14 adult carers for every baby. So it's really like good to keep in mind that if you are feeling really exhausted, that's because you're doing the job of 8 to 14 people.
Yeah, sounds amazing to have 8 to 14 people. I keep saying to my friends, we all need to buy a house next to each other and open up the back gardens. How good would that be?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, going back to the baby brain, you talked about how it starts in pregnancy. How long can baby brain last?
We don't know, but as we do know, the changes are permanent. So it doesn't matter if you're 90 years old, your brain scan will still show whether you've ever been pregnant before or not. There's studies currently going up to about 2 years that show that the changes are still happening, and they haven't studied beyond that point. And I did just see, and I literally haven't read it because it just came out a few days ago, but there's a new study showing that something about the changes are still happening at 6 years after having a baby. So a long time. Sometimes people ask me, what does postpartum mean? And I say it means after the birth. That's the rest of your life. So you'll never go back to being the same person you were. These brain changes are adaptive to make you a good parent, and you will always then be aware of your baby and want to keep them alive, forever. That doesn't change just because they've left home or something.
Yeah, totally get that. And the brain, as you said, it's plastic and it keeps changing and adapting, and that's one of the amazing things about being a human, I think, is our ability to adapt to any stage of our life. Maybe
exactly.
As we go.
Yeah, because so we always have neuroplasticity throughout our whole lifetimes, and this was something that was actually studied by and discovered by a female neuroscientist and a mother. Her name was Marianne Diamond, and she was a brain scientist. She had 4 children of her own. This is quite a long time ago she started doing this work. And after she had her own children, she was like, I feel different. I'm a different person. Someone needs to study this. Oh, it's going to have to be me. So she's studied a lot of stuff to do with oxytocin. And sorry, I think I'm mixing up her story. I don't think she's the one that discovered neuroplasticity. She's the one who's done a lot of work with oxytocin. But either way, what we see is a history of a lot of women scientists going like, hang on, no one's ever looked at things from this perspective before. So neuroplasticity used to be, because we could only study dead brains, we used to have to wait till someone died, then we'd slice their brain open and look at it. There was this assumption that brains were static, that was how they always looked and they would never change. But in fact, now since we've had brain scans and because of these earlier studies as well by female scientists, we now know that your brain is always changing. However, there are times in your life, the first few years of life, puberty and matrescence, when you become a mother, that mean that this neuroplasticity is massively increased.
Interesting. And does that go through to menopause as well?
We don't think so. So there are definitely a lot of links between postpartum and menopause. And there are a lot of hormonal changes that happen in the brain during menopause. But as far as I'm aware, I used to think neuroplasticity did happen during menopause, but I don't think it does. The studies are not showing that. But there's definitely a lot of hormonal changes that happen. But again, I might have to go and look some of this stuff up and check the latest science, because it is honestly, new things are coming out every week and month at the moment.
Yeah, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, and we're talking about things we didn't say we'd talk about. So I would want to now dive into the changes that someone might feel if they're experiencing baby brain. And I know you touched on a few of them, but I'd love to dive into what are some of the changes that might occur that might contribute to someone feeling a bit more overwhelmed, or like everything's just running out of control.
Yeah. So I think it's good to talk about it from that way, because when we talk about it in this really sciencey way, it's hard for someone with actually experiencing baby brain right now to kind of keep up with scientific studies and the names of scientists. It's hard for me to keep up with, and my babies are all big now. So often I find it's much more useful to exactly talk about it from the point of view of the experience of that mother. So usually I call these changes learning and loving. So learning obviously relates to the neuroplasticity, and loving relates to the hormonal changes. And that is a lot easier for people to kind of digest when they're in the thick of that. The learning can feel very overwhelming because it's so many new things, so many new neural pathways, and your brain is trying to figure out which of these pieces of information is important, which do I keep for my adapting to my new role, and which can I get rid of. And it will get rid of some stuff, because stuff that you needed and was important in your old life before you had children, suddenly now completely irrelevant. And then the other thing that happens is the loving. That can also feel very overwhelming, because it can be anger, it can be fierceness, it can be like hypervigilance, so there's so many ways that love can manifest. It's not just like a placid, peaceful thing. It can be very fierce and protective, and that hypervigilance can be really overwhelming as well. And we need to be a little bit careful, because hypervigilance can be a sign of a mental health problem, but there is a degree of vigilance that is quite a normal protective behaviour if you're a new mother. But when you're used to just doing what you want to do, going where you want to go, listening to what you want to listen to, having your work, your life, your social life, your friends, but then when suddenly all you can ever think about is your baby, that can be extremely overwhelming.
Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense. So someone's listening today and they're thinking, okay, I'm in the thick of it. I've got baby brain. I can tell this is all resonating with me. What are the next steps? Is it a matter of any tips to help live with baby brain? Do we embrace it, or do we need to put in some strategies to help reduce the overwhelm? What are some tips for you, for someone who's listening today that can totally resonate and feels that they're in the depth of it all?
I think for most people, just knowing is like a huge relief, because you suddenly realise I'm not crazy, I'm not the only one. This is actually making me a good mother, not a bad mother. So I think just knowing for a lot of people is really comforting. And then once you do know, then yes, I think it is really a matter of embracing that. You can do that in a couple of ways. One is by providing a lot of stability. And this is something really that ideally your community would provide for you, but it's unlikely in our society that would happen. But just simple things like, eating at regular times in the day. I know sleeping happens whenever you can when you've got a baby, but just trying to have some rhythm to your day that gives you that little bit of grounding while you're going through all these massive changes. Trying to keep just good mental health stuff, some fresh air, some sunshine, some socializing, some laughter and joy. One thing we talk about with oxytocin is it's the peace and joy hormone. So anything you can do to increase that, and that can include like watching your favorite comedy. Like it doesn't have to be I think we can get a bit stuck in our culture on being like a good mum and practicing mindfulness or something, but maybe actually all you want to do is watch Ted Lasso and repeat. And that's also a completely valid way to find peace and joy in your life. So I'd say just giving that routine and a little bit of structure and grounding. The other thing a lot of traditional cultures do is things like massage and belly binding, and a lot of those things, comforting foods, a lot of those things really are just about providing that stability and that love so that whilst you're going through this huge upheaval in your brain, you feel a little bit more safe to be able to go through that transition.
I can't let that one pass. What do you mean by belly binding? Like,
I mean, literally wrapping up your tummy.
It's like the belly bands that we've got, or the abdominal support tubey grip.
Yeah, like tubey grip. I often use tubey grip. It's like that's like the modern day way of doing it. In traditional cultures, I've interviewed an English midwife, and she said they used to tear up the bed sheets in the old London hospital and wrap the mums' tummies. I've spoken to some Noongar women, the Aboriginal elders where I live here in the southwest of WA, and they've told me they used paper bark and warmed up rocks by the fire to be able to provide that pressure and that warmth. It's really common in a lot of cultures to do some kind of binding. A lot of people these days have heard of closing of the bones. Most cultures have some kind of variation of that kind of thing. And it's interesting because talking to someone like you, it's almost more of an emotional thing than a physical thing. There's obviously a physical comfort provided by it, but I also think a lot of it really is just that feeling of being held, of being put back together, of being supported and of being safe. So it doesn't, of course, preclude you going to get your abdominal muscles and your pelvic floor and things sorted out. It doesn't make you lose weight or, get skinny or anything like that. It's much more about providing that grounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say to my mums, like, you've got the rest of your life to get fit and active and strong and do whatever you want to do. But those first, 6 weeks after birth, the best thing you can do for your body is rest. Lie down, get that horizontal rest and do what it takes to, as you said, like everything that you're describing is.
Yeah, and so the two ways that would be supported in a traditional culture is one is the binding and the other one is massage, because we know about blood clots and that it's really important to keep your body moving. So during that rest period, other people would have come to give you massage, and that would have kept your circulation going and, kept your blood flowing and all of that kind of thing. So that would have been one of the ways that women were supported to have deeper rest.
Interesting, because I know in some cultures, correct me if I'm wrong, but they weren't allowed to leave the hut, for example, for the 6 weeks, and their only job is to feed the baby and rest. So then I can see the massage could definitely play a role in terms of reducing blood clots and that sort of thing, whereas in our society, we're still going up to the toilet, we're still moving around. So we're naturally, like even in hospital after a cesarean, the next day they're getting you out of bed. So
they always want you to get out of bed. I know, because I often faint after I've had babies, and every time I had a baby, they're like, right, up and have a shower. I'm like, I'm not ready. But they love getting you up out of bed, don't they?
Yes, well, that's right. So we're balancing all the needs, isn't it?
Yes. And not being restrictive as well, because I also think some people will be listening to this going, oh my God, I couldn't bear the thought of spending 6 weeks in bed. And that's okay, but the principles of rest and stability and support, those principles are still there. You just do it in the way that looks and feels right for you.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Good point there, Julia. So we have dived into what the baby brain is. We've talked about the way it might feel. We've talked through some strategies to help, I guess, embrace it. And then are there any other tips or strategies that you want to just let our listeners know about before we wrap this up?
I think the main thing is this support should be provided for you, with you not having to think about it, learn about it, plan for it, ask for help. But it's not. So it's really a hard thing, because sometimes it can be a relief to learn about this stuff. And then sometimes they can also feel like there's a bit of grief as well, because you realize that you're not going to get what you need. So just acknowledging that that's a difficulty that we face. But there are more and more of people becoming aware of how important this time is, both emotionally as well as medically. The World Health Organization says that that immediate time after having a baby is one of the most critical times in a woman's life, and also one of the most neglected around the world. So it's really important. And if you're feeling pretty rubbish, that's not a huge surprise, but there are lots of people who can help. So whether that's friends and family, whether that is calling in a postpartum professional or a women's health physio or mental health support, there are lots of options out there. Try not to get too stuck into information overload, and really try and get that more practical physical support. I think that's the real gap that we face.
Okay, so some good first port of call, apart from what you've just said, would also be maternal child health nurse and a GP.
Yes, GPs can do referrals for lots of different things. If you already have a primary carer like a midwife or an obstetrician, they can also help you find the right kind of place to call. In Australia, we're lucky we have the Australian Breastfeeding Association hotline. We have the Panda mental health hotline. So there's lots of different places you can call if you're not really sure what to do or who to ask about something, or if something's really serious or it doesn't really matter, because it is really overwhelming in that time when you're not supported by your mums and your aunties and your sisters, and, you're just not really sure what's right and what you should be getting more help with.
Well, thank you, Julia. I think it's been great to chat about a topic that, as I said before, sort of a bit of a throwaway topic. So it's good to being able to dive into it and to reflect upon it, because I think, as you said, just knowing about it will hopefully help listeners today. So thank you so much for joining me today. For those who want to learn more about you and investigate you a little bit more, how can they find you?
Yeah, well, just as we were talking, I remember the names of the two scientists. So I think it's really important to always acknowledge my lineage and, who I've learned for. So Kirsten Uvnaz-Moberg was the oxytocin scientist. Marion Diamond was the neuroplasticity scientist, and they still are. Kirsten Uvnaz-Moberg is still alive today and still very prolific in her work. But they both have made massive contributions to this world. I've pulled all this stuff together myself from many, many different teachers, some of who I've mentioned today, into Newborn Mothers Collective, which is a postpartum training course. So if anyone's interested in actually becoming a professional or doing it as professional development within their existing career, that training is available. Or if people are just listening to this as mums and just want to know for themselves, I have a book called Newborn Mothers, which is very short, very easy to read, and can just kind of give you the overview of all of these different topics.
Amazing. And you've got a podcast.
I do also have a podcast. Yeah, which you can. Yeah, you can find Catherine on.
Yes. So I will link all of those in the show notes so that you can find Julia directly. So thank you so much, Julia, for joining me today. It has been great to chat.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links, including how to connect with Julia at www.fitnessmama.com/podcast. And don't forget to send Julia and myself a DM on Instagram. We would love to hear from you. Have a fabulous day, everyone. And I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.